Hey guys, Technomentary here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone SE 2020 edition with the iPhone XR or the XR. The head-to-head comparison, we're going to take a look at the hardware build, the software build, and the overall performance between these two phones, whether you're upgrading from one to another or deciding to buy either one. We're going to break all that down for you guys, answer the question for you guys to really see which one is the better phone or which one is worth getting. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. So let's go ahead and talk about these two iPhones. So the iPhone XR, iPhone SE, as you can see, both of them in our hand. Here we have is the product red edition, which is a special color for both of these phones. You'll notice the iPhone XR, of course, has a bigger body to it versus the iPhone SE, which has a smaller body. Just by looking at it, head-to-head comparison, of course, that makes the iPhone SE lighter versus the iPhone XR. So the iPhone SE is just a little over 5 ounces with the iPhone XR is almost close to 7 ounces, almost 2 ounce difference because of that bigger body. Of course, this other thing you'll notice is the color difference between these phones. Both of them are product red. As you can see, the iPhone XR does have that darker red shade to it, where the iPhone SE has more that pinkish red color to it. Of course, the other thing you'll notice physically on these phones that both of them does have that 12 megapixel single lens camera to it, which is a big factor to it. And we'll notice the Apple logo being shifted down on the iPhone SE. Now, the release date between these phones are, iPhone SE came out in April 2020, where the iPhone XR came out in your 2018 October timeframe. So about 1.5 to almost close to 2 years difference between these phones, and a lot has changed between that, and that's why we wanted to discuss about it. Side by side, of course, as we mentioned, the iPhone XS, the iPhone XR being the bigger body, if you put it side by side, has that bigger body overall to it. But does that really make a difference? Well, we'll talk about a lot of these. Both of the phones does have both front and back being all glass. So what that really means for it is that on the back, because they're glass, you're not able to do wireless charging, which wasn't possible in the previous generation of the phones itself. But the build of the body between these two phones does slight different in terms of material Apple has advertised between the phones. The iPhone build is pretty unique in the sense both of them are aerospace grade aluminum body phone. But the one thing you'll notice between it is that, of course, with the bigger body, the iPhone SE here looks like it has a bigger speakers and such, but they have around the same kind of speakers, same pretty much built to it, that bigger body versus a smaller body between it. Of course, physically, you'll notice the other thing between these two phones is that, of course, the iPhone SE here has that home button that Apple has brought back after generation of removing it with the iPhone XR. Has that all body screen to it and has Face ID. So that's one big other noticeable difference between these two phones. Let's talk about the display of these phones. Of course, visually, as you can see in my hand, the iPhone SE does have a smaller screen if you compare it to the iPhone XR. And how small is that? Well, the iPhone XR does have a 6.1 LCD Retina display. So it's a liquid Retina display versus the iPhone SE here, as you can see, much smaller. It has about 4.7 widescreen LCD display with IPS technology. So liquid Retina on the iPhone XR versus just regular Retina HD between it. And because it does have liquid Retina on the iPhone XR, it does have this better resolution. It has the 1792 by 828 pixel resolution at 326 ppi, which is the same around the iPhone SE here, which has 1334 by 750 pixel to it. They also have the same around contrast ratio, not much different, even at the level of brightness between that. Both of them does have 625 nit of max brightness to it. So display wise, slightly maybe that Retina, liquid Retina has a little bit advantage over it, but not much that you notice between these two phones. The one area that you were going to notice between these two phones is if you're looking for bigger storage, the iPhone SE does max out to 256 gig, but the iPhone XR only goes up to 128 gig, which is the mid-grade that you can get the SE in. And that's where the price point comes in. If you're looking to buy either of these phones brand new, the iPhone SE right now, starts around $499 versus the iPhone SE, which starts at $399 for their base 64 gig model. Of course, the more storage you go, the price does differ between these two phones. The other aspect we want to talk about, since we're talking about hardware between these two phones, is the chip on these two devices. The iPhone SE here does have that A13 versus the iPhone XR, which has the A12 chip. So one generation difference between it. The iPhone SE, when it came out, Apple did advertise as it being having the most powerful chip on any smartphone out there on the market. And head-to-head comparison, we're going to talk about the performance a little bit later in the video. Let's talk about the other aspect of these two phones is the battery life. So what kind of battery life can you expect out of these two devices? Well, the iPhone SE, because it's a bigger body phone, it does have the ability to house a bigger mAh battery to it compared to the iPhone SE, which is smaller body, so smaller battery. Pretty common sense there. And what kind of battery life can you expect out of? So both of the phones, if you're a light to medium user, will get you pretty much throughout the day with a full charge. But the iPhone SE, when it comes to video playback, which is a pretty much better indicator of battery life, the iPhone SE does give you 16 hours of video playback versus the iPhone SE, which gives you around 13 hours. So iPhone XR gives you much bigger battery video playback time if that's something you're looking at. Slightly bigger between these two devices. And let's talk about the last aspect of hardware is the actual IP rating between it for your dust, splash, and resistivity of these two phones. So both of the phones are actually rated IP67. So not much in terms of if you're really taking both of the phones for a dive, you're going to get around 1 meter for about up to 30 minutes underwater. But with any phones, if any of the phone has a crack or a broken screen or any sort of damage to it, water is going to get into it. Probably not recommended anyways to take it for a dive. We do want to be careful. Let's talk about the next part about why people buy iPhones, right? It's because of the camera between these two phones. And what kind of things can you expect in terms of the camera between these two phones? So the iPhone SE, as you can see here, both of the phones does have that 12 megapixel back camera and allows you to take some phenomenal photos. Both of them do have portrait mode, but as you can see, the iPhone XR is actually limited to two different settings. So you have studio light and contour light versus the iPhone SE, which has an upgraded ability to take more in terms of the settings for the portrait mode here. But if we take a look at the video, both of the phones can actually record up to 4K 60 frames per second, going up from 720. So video recording about the same. Of course, you have the same optical zoom to both of the phones as well. Let's move on to the next aspect of these two phones. It's going to be your software piece. So both of the phones, as you can see, we have upgraded to the iOS 14 with the bigger apps and a lot more features between these two phones. We found that when you're downloading apps and such, both of them does a phenomenal job. All of your major apps, from gaming app to social media to entertainment, all of that stuff between these two phones are working fine, no issues. We tested it out. If you haven't checked out those videos for the actual difference between these two phones, you'll see that both of the phones does phenomenal job for your entertainment, your social media, even for video streaming. This is probably an aspect you want to talk about around video streaming between these two phones, because the iPhone XR does have a bigger display, bigger real estate. It's almost better for watching YouTube and Netflix versus the iPhone SE, which has a smaller body to it. It looks really crunched there, so not really optimal for video streaming. Probably recommend a bigger display if that's something that you mainly do or between these two devices. And the last piece we want to talk about these two phones is entertainment wise. If you're watching, or listening to music, of course both of the phones does a phenomenal job. The iPhone SE, because it came out in 2020 versus the iPhone XR, which came out in 2018, this iPhone SE will get a couple more updates longer than the iPhone XR. The XR will most likely get updates for another 2 to 3 years at the minimum for the major upgrade. So you might see iOS 16 at the minimum on the iPhone XR versus the iPhone SE, which will get at least another 3 to 4 years. So a little bit more life in terms of software update because it has upgraded hardware, and Apple generally supports its iOS devices a year more in terms of at least 4 to 5 years when you first get these two phones. So that's going to be one deciding factor between these two phones. Is, are you looking for a phone with a little bit more life to it? You probably would be looking at the iPhone SE. So let's get to the final part of the video. The part that you've been waiting for is, why might you buy one versus the other? Well, let's talk about between these two devices. So why might you buy the iPhone SE over the iPhone XR? Well, a couple things here. The iPhone SE does have around 9% faster CPU speed when you do head-to-head comparison between these phones. It does have 1.7 faster download speed as well. It does have your fingerprint reader, which in this day and time might be better than having that Face ID if you're looking for it. And the other noticeable thing is that if you have really smaller hands or looking for a lighter phone, the iPhone SE does come in 46 grams lighter versus the iPhone XR. And that ability to support Wi-Fi 6 on the iPhone SE makes it maybe a little bit better. But besides that, why might you want to buy the iPhone XR in comparison to the iPhone SE? Well, a couple things here for the iPhone XR that we're going to mention for you guys is, first thing is that resolution that you get. Higher resolution, bigger screen because of that 6.1 massive LCD display. That Retina display gives you about 48% higher resolution and about 30% bigger screen size. Of course, it does have a 3D facial recognition, and it has a 1.6% more battery power. Although we've seen the iPhone SE does have a bigger battery, gives you 3 more hours video playback in comparison to the iPhone SE. So that's the breakdown between these two phones. What it comes down to is, if you compare between these two phones, it comes down to whether you want a bigger display versus a smaller display and a little bit more power, which the iPhone SE does deliver. But if you're looking to compare the price at this point, both of the phones, if you're buying the iPhone SE or the iPhone XR, you're going to be paying around the same price point. And now it just comes down to those minor differences between it. Head-to-head comparison, we say both of the phones are very much alike, and either phone are worth it getting. You have more updates, iOS updates to come on the iPhone SE, but you're limited with the screen size, of course. That's the downside to it. So hopefully this video is helpful. We also want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about these two iPhones? Which one is the better iPhone? Are you guys using any of these iPhones? Which one would you recommend if you're using one versus the other one? Leave a comment in the comment section. Would love to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.